The question I get asked frequently is, well, look, if I only have cancer in one part of my prostate, why do you need to treat the entire prostate? It's so-called male lumpectomy. This whole issue of focal therapies, both here and elsewhere, has gaining a lot of traction. And I've asked Leonard Marks to talk about this. These are the questions I gave him to address. Leonard, thank you for being here.
Thank you, Peter. What an amazing meeting. I'm very pleased to be here. We got interested in focal therapy of prostate cancer and active surveillance as well in about 2009. And I would like to disagree slightly with previous speakers. We think the MRI has really changed the world, prostate MRI, but it's tricky. And I'm very kind of jingoistic about this. I really only have confidence in the ones that are done in our place. We've done about 4,000 prostate MRIs starting in 2009. We've built a huge business for the radiologists at UCLA. It breaks my heart. I would love to bring ultrasound back as the standard, and actually we're looking at this very carefully. There's, just parenthetically, there's a new ultrasound technology called micro-ultrasound. Our standard heads are 7 megahertz, and a company in Toronto has a 29 megahertz head, which gives enormous detail. We'll be starting a study on that soon. I would love to replace MRI, but for now, the American Neurological Association and the Society of Abdominal Radiology have both endorsed prostate MRI when it's available in experienced hands to use this in cases of apparently missed prostate biopsies after a prior negative biopsy. We have a publication that will be coming out in JAMA Surgery next week, showing that even in first-time biopsies, MRI is very good. The cost effectiveness of it is not clear, but we think that since we've been able to identify prostate cancer for the first time reliably, to see it, not every case, but about 80% of important prostate cancers are clearly seen on MRI. And we think that the next horizon, we're rapidly approaching it, is that if we can put a biopsy needle specifically into this lesion right here, why not use the same technology to ablate it? The type of energy is not 100% clear yet which will be used, but we think that perhaps going forward, the number of patients requiring radiation or surgery will be reduced to approximately 20% of all, that active surveillance will be important for about 40%, and that focal therapy is growing like topsy. Currently the most rapidly growing management strategy is active surveillance, thanks to Dr. Carroll's work and that of others. But focal therapy is catching up, and in the not too distant future is going to be a very important thing to have a discussion with. These are, as I see it, the 5 compelling reasons to think about focal therapy. First, we can localize prostate cancer. This is a high-quality, multi-parametric MRI showing the lesion anatomically on 2-2 weighted imaging, and in a diffusion weighted imaging, which is functional information telling how dense this tissue is. Apparent diffusion coefficient measures a similar factor, quantifies the DWI, and dynamic contrast enhancement, which measures how quickly contrast material moves into and out of the suspected lesions. But now that we can see these tumors, the whole world has changed. We didn't have this until the past 5 or 10 years, really. Focal therapy works in many other cancers. Breast is, of course, the hallmark comparison, but many other solid malignancies are treated by segmental resection, thyroid, liver, et cetera, et cetera. So it works in other cancers. The efficacy of whole organ therapy for prostate cancer has been called into question by a number of international randomized clinical trials, big trials. Our holy grail of radical prostatectomy may not be as holy as we previously have thought it was, although it certainly helping a lot of people. The monoclonal index origin of prostate cancer is another reason to think about this. This has been promulgated by Hashim Ahmed in London. The concept is that there may be multiple tumors in the prostate, but one is the mother tumor which drives metastatic potential. If we can knock out the mother, we've done the patient some good. And safety and patient preference is so important. The first words uttered today in this, introducing this, was Stan Rosenfeld's words that patient preferences have to be taken into consideration. We've had a lot of talks with the FDA in a commercial aspect about getting a new laser product approved, and the FDA is planning to incorporate patient preferences for approval of new drugs and new devices. So you can't ignore this. Patient preference is very, very important. As someone who sits in the trenches every day and listens to men trying to make a decision about how to treat their localized prostate cancer, patient preferences weigh very heavily here. The ideal candidates for focal therapy, in my opinion, and this is still early, but we think the man should have a focal lesion as shown right here in his prostate. He should have Gleason 7 intermediate risk disease. We don't want to do this in high risk individuals. We don't want to do this in Gleason 6 tumors because they don't need treatment, and by and large, they don't. And the size of the prostate is a limiting factor. The current technologies that are available are only really appropriate for prostates around 50 cc's or less. We've got the MR-guided biopsy for localization, and I want to point out, and I agree wholeheartedly with what Matt Cooperberg said, MRI is not the sine qua non. It's not the bottom line entirely. If we see this lesion on the MRI, this man gets sent to the radiologist for an in-bore prostate biopsy, they're going to put a couple needles in this area right there and forget about it, because they believe that this is what you have to do. However, if we're considering focal therapy, I want to see a good template grid or mapping biopsy of this man's prostate so that I not only know where the tumor is, but I know where it is not, and that's an important determinant. We want to follow these patients just as though they're in active surveillance. Some people call focal therapy super surveillance, and that's not a bad word for it, because we don't know the long-term outcome. At our place, all of our patients in focal therapy, we've done a few hundred now, are in a observational clinical trial. We have a protocol. They all get follow-up biopsies at 6 months to determine whether we have achieved our goal, and again at 18 months to see if we have altered the natural history of the disease. This is the FDA's plan of this for approving new focal therapy products. The optimal treatment method, I must say, is not known. There are two on the market now ways to do focal therapy of prostate cancer. One is by cryotherapy, which really is an old technology, dates for the first FDA approval in 1991. It requires it to be done in the operating room under general anesthesia. Most appropriate is a hemigland cryoablation. This is not highly focused. It is great for taking out half the prostate, which has very little morbidity compared to whole gland therapies. It is covered by Medicare and most insurances, and it is FDA approved. So this is the first one that was on the market. We still do this regularly. The fact that it's covered by Medicare is a big advantage, and you can do a little larger prostates with this than you can with the competing technology, which is newer in the United States at least, high-intensity focused ultrasound. This has been used in Europe and Japan for more than 20 years. Lots of available data. The governmental systems in Japan and Europe pay for HIFU, not so in the United States until very recently. This also requires an operating room and deep general anesthesia. This must be full paralytic endotracheal anesthesia. If they move even a little bit, it throws off the registration, and you have to start over again. So this is very, very precise. This treats a focus of tissue about the size of a grain of rice, and brings it to a boiling point. When the ultrasound beams go through the body wall, they are diffused and there's no heat generated. But when they come to a point, there's a boiling temperature reached, and the tissue is destroyed. Very, very precise. It has been a cash-paying business for since its inception and up until its FDA approval 2 years ago. It still mostly is. Medicare has issued a facility code for it. So what used to cost a patient, if you're a Medicare patient, what used to cost you $25,000, now at least at our place, there is a plan to ask the patient for $5,000 in cash, and the rest is covered by Medicare. So this is partly opened the floodgates. Insurance still doesn't pay for it. So many thousands of men were treated for $25,000 in cash outside the United States by a United States company before it became FDA approved. So there is a big demand for this service. Their FDA approval was in October of 2015, a very interesting negotiated settlement. They don't have an approval for the treatment of prostate cancer. The company is called Sonoblate. There's a competing French company called Ablatherm. Nobody's done a head-to-head trial. I don't know which is best. We use Sonoblate because it's an American company. We were involved in their clinical trials. It has an FDA indication for ablation of prostate tissue, but not for treatment of prostate cancer. So that is an important distinction. Biopsy of these patients, both before and after, I think is very important. This is a mock-up of a prostate with an MRI visible lesion here, and the biopsies target this area. And as I said before, we do all over the prostate to be sure we've mapped the rest of the prostate, know where to go. 6 months after treatment, in every patient, we bring them back, get another MRI. Usually the MRI visible lesion has disappeared. We go back to that same spot, biopsy that very carefully, targeted fashion, because we know where to go. The image fusion device saves the spatial locations of these biopsy cores. We know just where to go. We're only interested at 6 months. Did we accomplish our goal? We're only doing this on intermediate risk prostate patients, and nobody's going to get in trouble in 6 months. By the way, we have a YouTube channel, targetedprostatebiopsy.com, which contains 10 or 15 short video clips about this work and related work. So I call that to your attention. At 18 months, as I say, we're going to go back and biopsy not only this side, but the other side as well, to be sure that we've truly altered the natural history of the disease. So this is early on, but we think we are. And in we published just recently a series on men who had undergone hemigland cryoablation, and the absence of cancer here was about 80% using this very comprehensive technology. And for a treatment which doesn't alter quality of life, this is 80%, I think, is great. 10% were failures, and 10% had a little bit of Gleason 6s that we're going to still follow. These are, we want to see data on this. This is the best available data from my colleague Hashim Ahmed's group in England. This shows the various types of spot therapies, hemiglands, cryo, hockey stick, etc. All of this can be done using the kind of guidance that I showed, but this is the best available data. 625 men, all with clinically significant prostate cancer, treated at various sites in the UK, with 56-month median follow-up. 2 rectal fistulas, which is a terrible complication, but we've pretty much learned how to avoid that. No cases of incontinence. And at this 56-month follow-up period, a 98% failure-free survival rate. I would like to say that biopsy was only done in 222 of these patients, a third of them, which is, in my opinion, a problem with these data. But the biopsy was negative in the majority of those who did get biopsied, and nobody developed metastatic disease or needed additional treatment. So we've come a long way in this focal therapy business. It really did start with, in the United States at least, with Bernard Fisher, general surgeon in breast cancer, who did clinical trials in the 1970s. Comparing mastectomy, radical mastectomy with lumpectomy, and his colleagues rewarded him for that trial by saying lumpectomy is murder, equivalent to malpractice. Contrast that with this court case, which was seen some 20 or 30 years later, where a New York fashion model underwent a mastectomy for breast cancer, was cured, but her career, of course, was ended, and she then sued her doctor on the basis that there was no discussion of any other treatment, and a New York jury awarded her millions of dollars in a settlement. So we've gone from a time where lumpectomy or focal therapy is murder to a time when if you don't discuss it with your patient, you could get in trouble. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here. What a wonderful conference Meryl and her colleagues have put together. Thank you.